like to say of my own family that we're a little more the Addams family than Leave It to Beaver. And to be honest, it's actually quite helpful. I tell people this all the time, and I tell people, that I don't judge other families. And it's very useful to be able to say that to people because I do weddings as part of my job. And I'll level with you, and I will tell you that most pastors say this. Pastor Tara doesn't say this yet, but she will. I hate doing weddings. I hate them so much. See me later for pre-announcing wedding. And I'll tell you why. I love funerals. I hate weddings. I love funerals because people at funerals say important things to one another. And they say true things to each other. And they sit around that table, and they usually take some time to say, I'm so sad this has happened. I love you, right? But weddings in our society have become just strange, ostentatious displays of wealth. And when you have to deal with mother-in-law and wedding planner and bride who has given up, and you've got to sit there and you've got to mediate all of that, and she starts telling you how to do your job. Oh, people. I had one family that was mad at me because I would not let them add to the wedding vows. Now, I let people write their own vows from time to time, but here's what she wanted me to add to the vows. I give you my soul forever. Oh, how romantic. How heretical. Christian teaching is that your soul belongs to God and will one day return to God. Doesn't matter who you are, and it isn't actually your property to give away. It will always be God's. And so I tried to explain to her, you can't say that in a Christian church, in a Christian wedding, because that's not a Christian idea. You cannot give to your husband. You cannot gift your soul to your husband. Your soul belongs to God. It will always belong to God. It's not for you. Oh, she was so mad. And then I'm getting calls from mother of the bride, and they're saying they're not going to give me tithes anymore to the church, and they're mad at me, and they're going to call the DS and the bishop. And the DS said, you can call the bishop, but Michael is quite right. And then pretty soon I've got a firestorm in my church because this family is going around to all the church members saying that pastor won't do their wedding correctly. And finally I said, I'm not doing your wedding, find someone else. And so they did, and happened to be an uncle who was also a pastor, an uncle of the bride who happened to be a pastor, and he wouldn't let her change it either. But at weddings, at funerals, I always tell the family, if any of you had a funeral with me thus far, I say, is there anything that I need to be made aware of? Any part of the family that doesn't talk to the other part of the family, or any discord, and then I tell them, my family is more Addams family than Leave It to Beaver. We all have our issues. I'm not judging. I just need to know. I just need to know. So that I can diffuse stuff or make sure people are kind of a little separate. Just let me know, right? I don't judge because let's face it, families are places where our greatest dysfunctions and brokennesses can lie, aren't they? For as wonderful as they are, they can also be a viper's nest, right? And do you find it interesting that how does God redeem the world, but He does it through families? And if you've read your Bible, folks, you already know those families are just a lot more soap opera than they are, holy, right? I mean, if you just read about Joseph and his 12 sons, that's a story, y'all. And the fighting between his two wives, the discord and all of those things, it's pretty incredible. So today we're looking a little bit at the story of Ruth, which is actually a very sweet romantic story in the Bible, which is a big turn and a big change, because that's usually not how it works. And the story of Ruth and Naomi was the story I told on my first Sunday here. You remember? Ruth had two sons, and they fled their home to stay out, and they went to Moab so that they would have food. There was a famine in the land. However, while they were there, Naomi's husband died along with both of her sons, right? And so Ruth, her daughter-in-law, and she returned to their homeland. And what's interesting is that in this ancient world, in this ancient first century, in this ancient Old Testament world, women could not own land. So what happens, right? They have to be beggars for the rest of their lives. Now this is the point of the sermon where it just gets a little bit muddy because our culture is so different than their culture. And I'm telling you this because right now I have to go into a whole bunch of biblical studies kind of stuff. And it's been my experience that sometimes when we go into biblical studies, this is what happens. But if you will stick with me, I promise we'll get somewhere good, okay? So what happened to Naomi's husband's land? Naomi's husband, it was supposed to go to his firstborn son. But his firstborn son died without children of his own. So this means that all the debts that he accrued and all those things have kind of fallen into what we today call an entail. And what's happened now is that the land now has to be given to someone else in his family. So what they've done is they've gone back up a level, right? And to perhaps her husband's brother. And then they look and see, well, he's dead, so who's the next one? Well, he had a son, so now the land will go to his son. So it just keeps moving back up the ladder as if everyone's alive, and then it goes back down again to another branch of the family. So Ruth and Naomi have nothing, have absolutely nothing. But her husband's land has been inherited by a gentleman by the name of Boaz. Now, how does this system work? What happens to widows in the ancient world? Well, I just happen to have Deborah here. And Deborah's married to Brad. And they're married, and they're a lovely couple. However, Brad died. And so what's supposed to happen is that Deborah will now be given in marriage to Brad's brother, Thad. And now they're married. And they have a baby. And this baby will not be considered Thad's son. This baby will be considered Brad's son. And so that the land will go to this child in Brad's name. And that's how the ancient world did these things. That's how they managed it. That's how they put these things together. And that way the land would stay in a family from generation to generation. It was literally your legacy. Well, again, what's happened in Ruth and Naomi's case is that the land has gone to a distant cousin, right? And they are now beggars. And what happens is that Ruth is poor, and so she has to do what the poor of Israel do to survive. And what happens is that the farmers come and they plow their fields and they take their own wheat down, right? And but they leave a section of the wheat, just sort of like the outer skirmish of the field. They leave that uncut. And the reason they do that is so that the poor can go to the fields, harvest their own wheat by hand, and that's how they would survive. So in other words, and by the way, this is a really great way to handle poverty. They have to still work, right? Even though they aren't landowners. They have to still work to provide for themselves. But the idea is that they're living off the goodness of the land. Well, Ruth, who isn't from there, she's from Moab, she happens to go into Boaz's field. And as Naomi mentions, Boaz is one of our relatives. And Boaz tells her, "Who are you?" And she said, "Well, I'm Ruth, and I came back with Naomi from Moab." And he says, "Well, make sure you come to my field every time you come to get wheat. Make sure you come to one of my fields." And he does this because knowing that she's a Moabite means that she's probably going to encounter a lot of racism and a lot of mistreatment. And so he invites her to come to his field all the time for safety. He had heard of how good she was. He had heard how she had taken care of Naomi when Naomi was widowed. He heard these stories. And so he wants to take care of her. Well, Naomi is, let's just say she's shrewd. And she's like, "So Boaz said that to you, huh? Well, make sure you keep going back to his fields, and while you're at it," and this isn't in the text, but I always imagine it this way, "while you're at it, lift up your skirt a little bit, just show a little leg, just do a little something." In fact, she actually tells Ruth to do something really, really audacious in this ancient culture. And here's what she says. "You know, we're getting ready to have the harvest celebration. Think Thanksgiving. And what's going to happen is Boaz is going to be celebrating his harvest with all of his people and all of his men, and he's probably going to have a little too much wine, and he's probably going to fall asleep. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to the threshing floor, which is a place solely the dominion of men. I want you to go over there, and I want you to lay down at his feet and uncover his feet. And then just wait. Now, what she's saying is, uncover his feet. His feet will get cold. He will wake up. He will see you there. And he will do what comes naturally. She's telling Ruth to basically become his concubine. It was not unknown in this ancient world for this to happen. It was not necessarily frowned upon, necessarily. I don't know. I mean, it was not necessarily frowned upon, especially for women in such a situation of poverty. And so what happens, but Boaz wakes up, and he sees Ruth down there at her feet. And he tells her, oh, it's not good for you to be seen here. Go quickly so that no one sees you leaving the threshing room floor and your reputation will be destroyed. The next day, he pays her former husband's debts, and he marries her outright. He literally pays what's known as a bride price for her, right? He loves her. He cares about her. He's come to know her. And he literally buys her out of poverty. What happens? But she manages to have her first child. Her first child will be known as the son of Naomi, because Naomi's being redeemed. And of course, this child will eventually become the grandfather of David, the king of Israel. And that's what happened. You know, this story of these women taking this incredible chance. A story of these women in desperate conditions and love actually blossoming in the midst of it. And a family being redeemed. From then on, it was a sheep, y'all. Sorry about that. Sorry, that's going to bother me all day. And the concept being that this child would become the redeeming person in this scenario, that this child represents what is the ancient world called a kinsman redeemer. This child is literally bringing back to life a dead branch of the family. Now, is that not, in some ways, a picture of Jesus? Bringing back life to the families of men. Bringing back life to the families of the children of God. Bringing life where there was once terrible and powerful death. Isn't it strange when you read the scriptures? Isn't it incredible that the very start of scripture begins with Adam and Eve, right? And Adam and Eve fall, and they have many children, but two of them of note are they're two young men. What are their names? Cain and Abel. And what does Cain do to his brother Abel? Kills him. Right? Cain is angry with his brother Abel, and so Cain murders his brother Abel. The very beginning of the story begins with a family in discord, and it doesn't stop there. As you follow through with all the families of the Bible, even King David and his son Absalom, what a horrible, horrible story, right? And as you read the stories and as you move on all throughout history, you see these families that are broken, these families that are not working, these families that are dysfunctional in powerful ways. We see tremendous violence in the life of families, and yet still, for whatever reason, family becomes God's means of redeeming the world. For what should happen later on, but a carpenter would be engaged to a young woman by the name of Mary, and wouldn't you know it, they will be the parents of the Messiah of God. He himself, this Lord Jesus, that would be born to Mary, this holy family, as they're referred to, this holy family has a long and powerful and tumultuous history. In fact, in Matthew's Gospel, there are 5 women mentioned in the story of Jesus, in the genealogy of Jesus. One of whom was a concubine or a prostitute, right? One of whom tricked her father-in-law into getting her pregnant, right? As you follow through the stories of these women and the stories that are in these Gospels, you hear the story of families that are broken. And isn't that true of so many of us, even those among us who come from the best of families, right? I've even met people and heard from people who say that it's hard for them to imagine God as a father because, frankly, their own fathers weren't very good to them. Mother's Day and Father's Day in churches can be a real viper's nest as well. You simply never know what people have gone through. There came a moment in my adult life where I forgave my father and mother for anything that they had done wrong. And the moment came to me when they were having a discussion. And my mother had an abusive father. The man I never met him. The man I call grandfather is not my biological grandfather, Papa. We don't know. But her own father, I'll just tell you this one example. She got her first beating at the age of 14 months because she outgrew her shoes. And so she just went through a lot in that early childhood with her father. My dad's father was dealing with PTSD after World War I. And he wasn't known to be very kind either. He died when my father was 8. And you just think, grew up in relative poverty. I mean, you got 10 brothers, 9 brothers and sisters, and a single mother. It's a tough life. It's a tough childhood. Although my grandmother on that side, Cookie Grandma we call her, was incredible. But one day they were talking about this, Mom and Dad, back and forth, and all of a sudden it hit me that my parents, for all their mistakes, and they made some, they all do, well, all parents do, they had made my life better than what they had had. And that one thing enabled me to forgive them for anything that I was holding against them, right? Because they had tried, and they had somehow made it better. They had made it better than what they had experienced. And I tell youth in the church, I say, you'll be able to forgive your parents when you realize, when they lose at some point the title mom or dad. When they move from, in my case, mom and dad to Sue and Ronnie. It'll happen when you see them not as mom and dad and all the expectations that follows, but when you see them as a human being, capable of all the mistakes that you're capable of, capable of all the wrong decisions that you're capable of. When we're children, we think that our parents know everything and can do anything, right? And we're mad at them when they don't do everything, right? We're upset about that. And we hold things against them, and we experience difficult things with them, don't we? But there does come this moment where you have to see them as people who are capable of the same mistakes you are, and that in some way enables you to forgive them. And still, there are so many who have so much more to forgive than I. I'm not, don't raise your hand or anything, but I know that there are people in this congregation whose parents abused them. Or there are people in this congregation who lost their parents at a young age. There are people in this congregation whose families are a place of tremendous and remarkable pain for them. That's true, and we know that. We know that deep down. We know that even the best of parents have their mistakes. And yet, for some reason, family is so close to us. It seems like those wounds are the deepest and the most difficult to heal. Doesn't it seem powerful then that God chooses family as his means of saving the world? A holy family, Mary and Joseph. A holy family, Joseph and Leah and Rachel. A holy family, the children of Abraham. A holy family, the people who were imperfect throughout their entire history. The family of David. He uses this one family as a means of saving and transforming the world, bringing people back together. And knowing how imperfect we are, he even offers us the community of God, the church, capital C. The church as she stands against history and against eternity. The church, whatever denomination, whatever place she finds herself in history, God offers us a substitute family in some cases and a bigger family in others. The reality of redeeming family is that when you came through these doors today, you're part of a family. And just like the other families that you came from, we're not perfect either. Can I get an amen? Yeah. And we suffer from a lot of the same issues and difficulties. But a family is supposed to be loving. A family is supposed to be forgiving. We all know that in this broken world that isn't always true. But I hope that as a church, you will be a redeeming family. I told you that I dislike weddings. I dislike doing weddings. I use the word hate, actually. I hate weddings. Part of that comes from being a singleton. That moment comes, oh, everyone, we're going to throw the bouquet or toss the garter. Let's bring out the singletons. These are the people who are behind in life. Yep, no one wants them. Please come out and fight for wilting flowers or slightly damp undergarments. That's fun. I hate it every time, and I'm like, I'm going to use the restroom. Oh, well, wait, never mind. If you're getting married, by the way, if you're getting married, don't do that to your friends. I mean, if they want to do it, fine, but don't make them do it. That's just all. Let me just give that piece of advice to you. Don't make your friends do it if they don't want to. I'm 40 now and still single, and frankly, I feel a little weird sitting up there with 20-somethings. I really do. But you know, isn't it ironic that in the wedding ceremony, there's my absolute favorite blessing that's ever been written in the liturgy of the church. And it's this. You say it to the bride and groom. I can see it in my mind. I can see them standing here. And you say to them, may those to whom love is a stranger find in you generous friends. May those to whom love is a stranger find in you generous friends. Imagine for just a moment if we as a church family were generous friends to the lonely. Imagine if your table at home was a place where the lonely could find a meal and friendship and family. Imagine if the redeeming family that you find here breathes out into the world to all those people living in the Adams family and the Munsters. Imagine if they saw in you what loving families look like. And that's what we're searching for. Not perfection. We even said it last Sunday. Not perfection. We can't seem to get to perfection. But what if we're just looking for a forgiving place and a loving place? Oh, dear church, may those to whom love is a stranger find in you generous friends. Amen.